Thank you. But the thing about head size, it's also proportionate, right? So like
I can't wear
with
this.
hats. Like,
not always.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
definitely not always.
Not always proportionate.
You know, I'd rather have a big head than a long neck.
Steve could have
someone with a long neck looks very weird.
But still have a.
Welcome to the Gathering Greenhouse, a podcast to help us grow together. I'm Steve.
I'm David.
I'm John.
And we are ready for another exciting episode here. So,
what if instead of like you're just kind of like, you know, you're like, and we are ready for another. Like, what if you were like, and here we go.
And here we go.
Let's try it that way.
Okay.
All right.
And here we go.
No, we got to do the whole. I'm Steve,
thing
I'm
again.
David. I'm John.
And I'm Steve. And I'm Steve.
What is
you got to
happening?
go. I'm David.
But you're not David.
I know I'm not. I'm Steve.
I'm David.
There's John. Here we go.
Yeah, we're going.
Guys aren't helping here at all.
Best podcast intro ever.
John looks like he's asleep here.
I got like a headache.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway,
This is my surgeon.
I have a game for us.
Is it a real game?
This is a real game. Yes. It's
no.
Faith or Fake is the title of the game.
I like this.
And I
Oh,
good. I'm
no.
glad. I'm glad. See, I feel like
Sometimes though you have these kinds of
yes,
games.
I know. I knew you were
then,
going to
like,
say
your
this.
categories are
Yeah.
not great.
You're right. You're right. You're right about that.
I think you'd do better if you just made them up yourself instead of trying to get them off of the.
I think we're going to get a comment
know.
to the effect this week of, well, you know, faith is fake. So you're just saying fake and fake. You know, that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So if you're that
You're
guy,
so clever, Mr. Atheist.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah, so clever, so clever.
Right.
Well, this goes along with the testing that we talked about with Abraham.
So we're taking a test.
Well, you know,
I hate
you're
tests. I did
testing.
so
You're
bad at
testing
tests.
your
So
biblical knowledge.
You are going to apply pressure to us,
Correct.
and it will reveal. what we know.
But here, as a pastor, right, you can only lose in this game because you're expected to know this stuff.
All right. Well, let's do it.
But these are fun ones.
Let's be losers.
These are fun ones here. That's why I always hate when people, you know, do that with the past because they're like, oh, you don't know that, or they'll come up and like give you some Bible verse and expect you to like just rattle off the deep meaning of it on a Sunday morning. You're just like, I don't got time for that right now.
Nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that. All right, so faith or fake here.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a story in the Bible.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
I'm not going to give you the reference unless you guys are really struggling here, but I do have a verse that we'll refer to for it. But okay, story number 1.
Wait, what are we supposed to do?
This is real. You have to say if it's faith or fake. So essentially, real or fake.
Okay.
Faith is like you know.
Is it
it's
a real
just,
story or fake
you know,
story?
faith and fake sounds cooler than real or
Got
fake.
it.
You know,
Okay.
because it's Bible related.
All right, yep.
So basically, you have to tell me if this actually happened.
Okay.
Okay, a guy got eaten by worms because he didn't give God.
Faith.
I think that's real.
All right. So you're both saying real.
Yeah, it's
one
real.
said faith and one said real.
Yeah.
Okay. That is correct. So Acts chapter 12, verse 23. So King Herod Agrippa the First, he when he accepted praise as a god instead of giving God the glory, that's what happened. And then he was really struck dead first, and then eaten by worms. He wasn't eaten
that's
by
actually-
worms while he was alive.
What
That
I
would
was
be
gonna
much
say
worse.
is, yeah, because, you know, when you die, dust to dust, you know, it happens somehow.
That's actually a historically verified story outside of
found
the Bible.
worms.
Outside of the Bible, though the nature of his death,
Yeah.
it's historically verified. So kind of a cool one. All right.
It is. So
All right, we're 1-0.
you're 1-0. I only have 2. So here's the next one. A prophet called down fire from heaven on a king's army and then turned them into frogs. Is that faith or is that fake?
Well, that's fake.
Okay, don't say why,
That's fake.
John.
It's not in fact they're mixing stuff together, but
No, I don't think anybody in the Bible got turned into frogs.
no, I'm saying
That's when you
they're trying to pull from the plague,
Right, yeah.
Right,
They're mixing
images like
stories,
Elijah
but
calling
there's-
fire.
well,
Yeah,
also what you get you do something bad to a witch and you get turned into a frog until you
warts.
get kissed
Yeah.
by
Wait,
somebody.
is that true?
According to Disney, it is.
Princess and the Frog.
Right?
Yeah.
Aren't there other one? There wasn't other ones like that? Okay. I don't know.
I think it was actually like a fairy tale before it was Disney.
Okay. Disney likes to, they just latch on stuff that exists. So yeah, you guys nailed it on this. I'm impressed.
Oh,
Good job.
Good job.
Yeah, that was not a great game.
Okay. Well, I tried.
No, I think you'd do better if you made these up yourself. So instead of just, don't rely on the interwebs.
But it's so fun to do. Okay, so
you
did rain down fire, which is kind of interesting, and would be. Have you ever been tempted to rain down fire?
Yes. Yes. Fairly regularly. Actually.
Fairly regularly.
Yeah.
Like today, have you wanted to rain down fire?
I'm not a very tolerant person.
There's been a few times in my car where I've liked to rain down fire on somebody. It's probably where I'm the most angry.
Yeah.
Driving.
Yeah. Do you get angry because people are going too slow?
Everything. Yeah, too slow. Cuts you off.
So my theory is if you're getting cut off, you're going too slow.
Yeah.
That's kind of my rule.
But if you're going with traffic and the car in front of you,
I don't think you're getting cut off if you're going too slow. I think at that point you're just getting passed aggressively. But I think there is people who seem to slam their car into a space that there wasn't space for their car.
Did they get in?
Making you slam on your brakes.
Hey,
that's
if they got in, there was space.
Yeah.
Could have gotten hit.
David is cutting people off. I've done it before and risked my entire family's life and regretted it after the fact.
So don't cut in front of semis.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the stopping ability that cars do. But a lot of times people just leave too much space.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah,
or going slow in the fast lane is
yeah.
Or going too fast and cutting around traffic.
Not a thing.
I don't know. Sometimes I see people. I'm like, what? What are you going to gain? You're going to gain 5-10 seconds.
What are
you going to do with that time?
Sometimes it's just the satisfaction.
It's just the satisfaction of doing that. Okay.
And then you wave at them with all your fingers.
Right. Now that we've reached our fun limit for
that was enough.
The podcast, we tone it down a little bit here.
Okay. All right.
So we were talking before we went on here. You gave a nice summary of that. The whole Old Testament up to the New Testament. So we are in our series called The Plan, and we are in the part where we're talking about Abraham and Isaac. So, first question for you. If God wasn't going to make Abraham do it, why did he tell him to sacrifice Isaac? Right?
Yeah.
Covered this pretty extensively.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
Yeah. So I think we should just say, first of all, if you haven't seen the sermon already, you should go back and watch it.
You should, yeah.
Because this conversation will make a lot more sense.
It will.
If you're familiar with the story. Or at least go read Genesis 22 so you know what the story is. So the question is, if God wasn't going to make Abraham do it, why did he tell him to? Yeah, what do you think, John?
I've had lots of thoughts about this. Sometimes the natural result of something like you're asked to do isn't actually what is beneficial. Sometimes it's the process that got you there. And I recognize that God's wisdom surpasses our own. And so often I think that's how a lot of things in our lives. So, you might think God's calling you to something and you're like, well, then all of a sudden God called me to something different. And it's like, well, did he change his mind? No, he probably was calling you to this thing ultimately, but he knew that for you to get there, you needed to walk this path to maybe learn something, to grow in something. And even though you thought that was the end result, God had a higher plan, than what you directly saw. I also think there's a lot of imagery of, the sacrificial lamb in there. And if Abraham had to have actually sacrificed Isaac, instead of God providing that image of Jesus, wouldn't be in that story. So, I think it's a picture of Jesus firstly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, first and foremost, we have to identify that Abraham is not us. So, everything that God does with Abraham is not necessarily normative for us.
Yeah. Can I ask one quick question
Yeah.
on that? So you saying that in the sense of he's not us and he's different, he's a different personality. You're saying that God had a bigger plan for Abraham, so therefore he's not us.
So Abraham is a unique character in history,
Yeah.
and a unique character in the redemptive plan. Just like there are several of these, like King David. He's unique in the redemptive plan, and so we shouldn't necessarily say everything that God did with Abraham he's going to do with me, because that's not necessarily true. God's actually doing something really unique in the life of Abraham. So we have to remember that. But that doesn't mean we can't pull from Abraham's life the character traits of God, because God doesn't change. So who God is in his interactions with Abraham is who he is in his interactions with us. I would say in this particular story, the benefit that Abraham is going to reap from this is from the journey, not the completion of the journey. So, all of this growth that happens in Abraham from the moment he says, yes, I'll obey, to the 3-day journey where he's working out, how is God going to provide? Can I trust God to keep his promises? Even to the point where he reasons his way to resurrection, which is, fascinating that's what Hebrews says, that Abraham just figured God must be a God that can resurrect the dead. All of that is part of Abraham's growth that happens because of the journey, not necessarily the completion of the journey. And sometimes God takes us on a journey for the sake of the journey, because in the journey we learn things. And when we get to the completion of the journey, it's like, well, here we are, right? And it doesn't really matter where that is. It's what we've been through that got us to where we are. And I think that's a really important piece of this story.
Yeah, and I think within this story, there's the idea that Abraham had a really hard time coming to have Isaac, right? And, you could say that he was maybe putting Isaac even before God. And those are the sneakiest things to deal with in life, because it's a good thing. Having a son and caring for your son and loving for your son or your kids is a really good thing. But if you start putting good things or and above God, they can be a bad thing in your life. It just makes me think of people who have all this biblical knowledge, which is a great thing, but they don't ever put it to use, right? They know so much about God, but, it's like kind of like the Pharisees. They've put the law above the meaning of the law, So I feel like that was one of those tests, and was one of the parts of it, of like, hey, I am, my commandments are most important.
Yeah, I mean, so what Satan loves to do is he loves to take God's good gifts and convince us to misuse, abuse, or overuse them. And you think about all the things that will get your life off track. That's usually what it is. It starts with a good thing, and then that good thing is either misused, overused, or abused, and it leads you to a bad place.
Yeah.
And I think God is gently correcting Abraham here, maybe.
Yeah. Right. Next question. Why did Abraham handle this test better than he did other tests earlier in his life?
Yep. So, like we've talked about some of the things that Abraham got wrong.
Yeah.
And this one he gets right.
Last Sunday, right?
Last Sunday.
That was a...
Yeah. So I actually, in my notes in preparation for this, one of the, I always have 4 or 5 different paths I run down with a sermon to say, okay, what's this sermon going to be about? And, at one point, this sermon is going to be about Abraham saying, here I am. And I thought that was a really powerful thing. One of the other things I had was that everything in Abraham's life was preparation for this moment. In that this is the high point of Abraham's obedience, and it's at the high point of Abraham's obedience that we most clearly see Jesus in the Old Testament. And that's a really cool thing, that God in his scripting of this story, knows Genesis 22, this is pivotal in the whole plan of redemption, that I'm going to lay out in really specific terms how I'm going to save people. I'm going to provide a lamb. That lamb is going to be sacrificed. And so I think, everything up to this point is preparation for Abraham.
Yeah.
And sometimes in preparation we fail. And I think the really valuable lesson for us in that is to realize that just because I failed doesn't mean I'm done. My failure is an opportunity to learn and get better and move on. And very often, as in the life of Abraham, my failure can lead me to something even better and greater. So I think, what we've seen here is a culmination of a guy who failed and didn't quit.
Yeah.
He kept going. So
how did you come to, so if you had mentioned 3 different topics that you could have picked out of these verses here, this section of the Bible. So how did you come to the decision of, hey, this is the big picture that I want to tell? Was it, inspired by just reading and meditating on the word, or were you like, this is good for where we are as a church or as a culture?
Yeah. It's different every week how that happens. Yeah. Because in my process, as I go through, I start working on a sermon 4 weeks ahead. And every week I kind of jot notes of, if I had to preach this today, how would I preach it? And so that is just gradually morphing and evolving. And for this one, I think at some point, the whole picture of obedience is what was starting to crystallize in my mind. And I just felt like this, it often just is a feel thing. It's like, this feels like this is the route to go. And at some point, it was like, okay, I think obedience is where I want to run with this.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, last question I have, which is kind of a fun one for you, is what would you like to add that you didn't get to talk about? Yeah.
So I mentioned it briefly.
Yeah, you did the
here I am.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really cool thing in the passage.
Yeah.
That, it's not in his interactions with God twice, Abraham says, here I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what a great way for us to interact with God is to just what if you started every day? All right, God, here I am. What do you want me to do for you today? If you read his word and said, okay, here I am. How can I apply this? But I also think it's cool that he responds to his son that way. So when Isaac says, Father, and Abraham responds with, here I am, which indicates this is who he is. That Abraham is a guy that makes himself available to God and to others. And I think, and like I said, this could have been the sermon. There's something for us to chew on there about what it means to be available to God and available to others, and how that can impact just the way you view your life. So if one of the core principles of my life is that I want to be available to others and to God, that takes away a lot of the place I have for complaining and a lot of the place I have for selfishness, right? So I find myself in a situation I don't want to be in. And instead of saying, why am I here? I say, here I am.
Yeah.
And that radically changes my perspective on it. Yeah. We'll get into the perspective thing a lot more in Joseph, because I think that's a really key element of Joseph's story. But I just think it's a great perspective to live by.
Yeah. And I think it's also sometimes you have maybe expectations for the day, or expectations for a situation you're getting into, or expectations for the future of how your life is going to look. And when you get rid of those expectations, you're going to have a much better experience when you're trusting God and saying, God has given me exactly what I need for this day, for my life. What I have is what God has given me, and that's what I need. And I think that, oftentimes if you go to a restaurant that you're really, really looking forward to, and it doesn't necessarily meet your expectations, or you go to a location like a city or a park or somewhere where you've heard a lot about it, you're really excited for it, doesn't quite hit the mark, but it's still nice. You leave feeling like, it was okay, But if you go into it with no expectations, sometimes you're surprised, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe you guys can remember this. I'm not 100% sure on this. We did a sermon series a few years ago called 3-Word Prayers. We might run it back again sometime, do 3 more 3-word prayers or something. Yeah. I think one of them was, here I am. That might have been one of the 3-word prayers. Cool. So if so, go back in our archives on YouTube, find the 3-word prayers series, and see if you can find that. So
that was a long time ago.
Was it a long time ago?
It was like four years ago.
Post-COVID, though.
Post-COVID,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
2021.
So I have one final question for you.
Uh-oh.
What kind of vehicle are you checking out that has a cassette deck in it?
The best kind.
The best kind? Yeah. Do you have a cassette deck in your current car? Because I'm like, how are you going through a list? How old would your car have to be to even have a cassette deck?
Yeah, I don't think we have one.
They stopped that in probably the 90s or something.
So in our old Sequoia that we had, that was a 2000.
Do you know what a cassette deck is?
Or 2005.
Yes.
I think there was a cassette deck in that one. I don't think any of my cars now have one.
So my second car had one, but it was old.
Yeah. So like
have cassettes?
my first car had a cassette deck. It didn't even have a CD player. I don't know if you guys probably don't even remember the earliest CD players in a car. You had got this thing that you put on your dashboard that was a platform that would bounce.
Yeah.
So
No,
then you put your Discman, you'd put it on top of that, so that when you're driving, because otherwise every time you hit a bump, the CD would skip.
How long ago was this? Because they like invented skip protection. I feel like not that long after they.
It was a while. It was a couple years. Yeah, because I mean,
couldn't have been. It had to have been a very niche item.
So we were shifting to CDs probably the very late '80s, early '90s. I think.
I don't know.
Probably when we started to make that.
I remember that.
Right. Shut up.
You need to know everything music, John.
What I liked about my car that had the cassette was that you could buy for like $15. It would go in, and you could plug in your iPod to it.
Oh yeah.
And it worked so much better than like any
until
of the
it got
radio
dirty
things.
or something.
Yeah, but they were so cheap that
You just keep running them through.
Yeah, and my next car didn't have that, and so I had to go back to CDs, and it also didn't have an aux.
Yeah.
Yeah. My problem was I always scratched the CDs.
I had one car that had a 6 CD changer in it. That's pretty sweet.
That's wild.
It was right in the little thing here, so you put your 6 in, and you could
We had a.
flick back and forth between them.
It was one of the vans growing up. It had one of those with CDs, and then had a second one for DVDs.
Nice.
For the stuff in the back. It was great.
All right.
Is that more than you were bargaining for?
No, I was just curious where that was going to go, because I was like, why did he mention cassette
It was kind
deck?
of a throwaway line. It wasn't in my notes or anything.
You just added that in, but you said it very
kinda
casually, like you were honestly thinking that should be in someone's checklist, or that is in your checklist.
I don't think I said it in first service at all.
Okay.
I think in second service I said it, and then I was like, "What did I just say?" So I actually paused and I asked, "How many of you have a cassette deck?" And there were a couple people who did.
Still had a cassette deck in the car.
Yeah, and then in third service I was kind of worried about time, and I was kind of keep things moving.
Okay, that's what happened.
So I just flew right through.
I only heard it in third service, and it was just part of the list. All right. Okay, well, thanks for hanging out with us on the Gathering Greenhouse. So keep it real, keep it rooted, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.